Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the original Loretta Brown Show, radio to open the heart, heal the soul, and awaken the consciousness. Good morning, Mr. Benny Mathers. How are
Hi.
you? I was waiting for that. I was like ready. Oh,
One more day
oh,
till the big Hallmark day, but we
I
should remind
know.
everyone, yes, love can be experienced and expressed 365 days a year. Am I not right?
You are right.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank
I
you.
feel the heart glowing and the love rays going out.
Love, exciting and new. Okay, I borrowed that one, but
We
it's
are
still
so
fun.
on this. That's so funny because it's exactly the song that was going in my head.
Was it really? Wow.
Yeah, it really was.
Hmm.
Yeah, so everybody don't forget Valentine's Day. And I do agree with you. You can celebrate it anytime, but
Mhm.
also don't avoid it. It's a great
No,
excuse to,
should never avoid love.
yeah, you shouldn't do it.
In
So spread
addition,
it.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, in addition, if you do want to shell out $90 worth of love, that's how much roses are going for as an average price of a dozen. So, yeah, can you
What?
believe that? Yep. I mean, per areas, I think low versus the high, 90.
Whoa.
It's pretty up there.
Okay. Well, so if the guy shows up with roses or the gal shows up with roses, whichever it is, I'm gonna say thank you.
I mean, totally.
Yeah.
90
Wow.
different ways, maybe, or 90.
Wow.
Well, you guys can figure that one out.
Yeah, you can figure that one out. Anyway, I hope everybody's gonna have a good time and I'm gonna go to work and then
Me too.
yep, that's what happens.
Mhm.
But anyway, yeah, just a few announcements and then some astrology. And I've got a great guest today. It's going to be a wonderful conversation, sort of coming on the tail end of We Live in Interesting Times. So you're going to want to stick around. Anyway, I'm Loretta Brown. I'm the owner of Reiki Oasis, located right here in the greater Seattle area. You can find out about me at ReikiOasis.com and schedule everything there to include, yep, I'm going to Egypt again with a group of lovely sacred travelers, and it will be September 30th to October 14th. And we're going to do a 5-day add-on to that trip to Petra, Jordan. This is a lovely trip. If you think you're interested, you can actually go to schedule.reikioasis.com. I have some free Zoom discovery calls set up. You can sign up for that. And if you want to have your own private little talk with me, you can set that up. And if you just want to send an email to reikioasis@gmail.com, that's reikioasis@gmail.com, and ask for the itinerary, I'll send that to you. So I hope you'll join us. I already have quite a few people going, and it's going to be really fun. And let's do a quick astrology check-in. And today I'm going to do some Vedic astrology. I usually do Western astrology, but I borrowed this from a Vedic astrologer whose name I forgot to write down. So I apologize ahead of time. We just had a full moon yesterday, February 12th in Leo, but this is no ordinary lunation. In Vedic astrology, it occurs in a rare and volatile astrological zone called Gandanta, meaning knot or karmic breaking point. Falling on the cusp of the signs of Cancer and Leo, this powerful full moon signals major endings and transformative new beginnings, but it can bring instability, anxiety, and upheaval personally and globally. And I want you to think about that. Cancer is water, right next to Leo, which is fire, and the moon is right there. And that sounds like steam, right? Fire and water. So happening in Ashlisha Nakshatra, known as the snake star, very appropriate for the year of the wood snake, this full moon carries an intense mystical energy. Like a snake shedding its skin, we are called to release toxic patterns, uncover hidden truths, and embrace change, but not, I'm sorry, without discomfort. That skin's a little tight. Be mindful of emotional intensity, secrets surfacing, and power struggles. And with Uranus in the mix, expect sudden shifts, impulsive behavior, and unpredictable events. Whoa. And yeah, that's going on. Everybody's going, yeah, that is what's happening, Loretta. So stay grounded, avoid rash decisions, really come into your center. I think it's a great time to remember all of the wonderful things that we know how to do to center and ground and calm ourselves, and especially breathing. Don't forget to exhale, right? On a collective level, this full moon stirs unrest and transformation, shaking long-standing systems. In the US, economic and political shifts may deepen divisions and create uncertainty. Travel disruptions, accidents, heightened tensions in groups or organizations are possible under this full moon. And it sounds really kind of like all over the place, but remember that these are portals to transformation, these things that come. Um, there's something that comes out of chaos that can bring us into a good place. And then tomorrow, Valentine's Day, we have a celestial glow. I love it. As Venus reaches her brightest luminosity of 2025, while exalted in Pisces. This amplifies romance, creativity, and sensuality, making it a potent time for love and artistic inspiration. However, with Rahu, the shadow planet near Venus, be mindful of any illusions in love and attraction. Not everything is as it seems. And I want to say this, if you're a stargazer, sky watcher like I am, Venus has been so bright in the sky that sometimes it draws my attention. And I think it's something like an aircraft or a planet or something. It is really bright. So go take a look at it. And yeah, time for love, times for good things. So, wow, talk about all kinds of energies. And on that, I'm going to bring in my guest today. I welcome TJ Woodward, a visionary leader in spirituality, personal transformation, and addiction recovery. TJ is a best-selling author, an inspirational speaker, and a revolutionary recovery expert. He is the creator of the Conscious Recovery Method, a groundbreaking approach that recognizes the innate wholeness within every individual. Ordained as an agape minister, TJ has touched countless lives through his books, including Conscious Being, Conscious Recovery, and Conscious Creation. And he's been featured alongside thought leaders like Loretta Brown, Marianne Williamson, and he has a wonderful way to empower us to embrace curiosity, connection, and true healing. And now he's on the original Loretta Brown Show. Welcome to the show, TJ.
Thank you so much, Loretta. It's been a while since we've had a conversation, so I am very much looking forward to this, and thank you for inviting me back onto your show.
You're so welcome. You're always welcome. I was thinking when I was doing the astrology that there's some sort of interesting timing, right? Call it God's timing, universal timing. We're talking about the snake shedding its skin and a time of transformation, portal to transformation. And then there's all of these things happening on planet Earth. And like you said before the show, what an interesting time to be alive. I would like to kind of jump in there. I'm just going to ask you a question sort of off the cuff and we'll get deeper into it. What are you I'm most excited about right now? What are you looking forward to the most right now?
Well, I mean, I can speak about that personally, but I'll start with sort of like globally, if you will. What I'm most excited about right now, sort of globally, is there's such an opportunity to wake up right now. Anytime is an opportunity to wake up to the truth of who and what we are. And the reality is every moment I get to choose, am I going to stay open or am I going to close my heart? And that's always a choice. Most of the time, people are making that choice unconsciously. Something, quote unquote, triggers them. I don't use that word. I use the word activation, but something triggers them and they close their heart or they get into a reactive mode. And while there's nothing inherently wrong with that, that just continues to create more of the same. So if we want to be part of birthing a new consciousness, every single moment, whatever happens, is an opportunity. So when things are really intense, I tend to lean in and say, wow, what a glorious opportunity for myself and for the world to wake up to an even greater reality and being more in the frequency of love. So that's what I'm most excited about. I do think it's a really wonderful time to be alive.
I love what you said. It's an opportunity as opposed to a challenge, or I can't do this, or this is taking me down, or I can't handle that. Hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
and the reality, and to be clear, I think sometimes people in the spiritual world, even maybe in the recovery world, do what we call as a spiritual bypass. Like, I'm going to pretend like this isn't happening. That's not at all what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about like ignoring the way I feel or ignoring the impact of certain things happening in the world. I'm not going to pretend like people aren't being harmed by certain things. What I am going to say is, oh my gosh, this is happening. Now, how do I want to contribute? I'm either adding to the violence of the world or adding to the love of the world. And that is a moment to moment choice.
Wow. This to me is the subject, right? And it's a deep subject. A lot of my clients, my friends, the people that I work with, all of us are looking at the world going, there is this division, right? There is this and there is that. And we see it, countrywide, politically. It's also within our own family structures and with the things that we've been experiencing. And you said, instead of getting caught up in the emotions of it somehow, but I want you to dig down into that. I want you to unwrap that a little bit more for people and really bring it to the living level of our life.
Yeah. And I'm going to start
Yeah.
with maybe a slightly provocative statement. I don't think we live in a polarized country in the way we're being told we're living in a polarized country.
Yeah. Thank
What
you.
I actually, in my experience, it's not that we're living in a polarized country, it's that we've been conditioned to have polarized thinking. Now, why is this important? The division that we're experiencing in truth has always been on planet Earth. There's always been a war happening on planet Earth, but there's also always been love happening on planet Earth. And the reality is there's always more love than violence happening on planet Earth. Just there is, right? That's just the truth. The thing about the polarization is if I've been conditioned to have polarized thinking, I will look at a family member or a person that lives down the street or a person in a different state, and I will say, I am different than them because we have a different opinion. But if I believe I am, and when I believe I am my opinions, that's the truth. Therefore, I'm at odds with people on planet Earth. When I understand that there's a reality within me that's beyond points of view or perspectives, then I can stay curious with the people around me. The mind can be a trickster because someone listening or watching right now might say, are you telling me that I am going to have to agree with these different opinions? Not at all. But I can actually remain connected with another person on a soul level, even if we have different points of view. I know this is a layered conversation, and I'm glad we have time to dive in.
Wow. Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Uh, You said something that there's more love. When you were talking about that more love, I was thinking about how we are as children. Um, Maybe the natural tendency to be very loving. I was a little girl that was, oh, just love everybody. And I'm actually kind of naive. Even to this day, I'm gullible, right? I've got to work my way through it. But can you talk to that a little bit and maybe even share a little bit of your own story?
Yeah, and I mean, this to me is the most important anchoring point of the conversation. Because if we understand, when I understood that I came into the world naturally expressing everything that I have been seeking in a spiritual practice, and I'll go through a short list: more presence, more joy, more connection, and the ability to feel my feelings. That was innate for me. And if I look at any pre programmed human, that's what I see. I see effervescent love. Now, we end up getting programmed by the world to believe we're other than that. Now, it's nuanced because of course parents need to teach us things like don't run out into the road, right? We have to remain safe, and a parent's role is to do that to a degree. The issue is we end up doing it in ways that become detrimental to our innate spiritual self. And if the word spiritual doesn't work, it's our essential self. If we look at a small child, we can see that. We can see that joy in their eyes. And if we remember our own journey, most of us remember that experience before that was tarnished by the world. Some people don't. I've worked with clients, and it breaks my heart when they say, I don't remember being happy or joy filled. I only remember being afraid. So we all have a different experience. But if we start with, that's what it means to be human, because I don't think the human and the spiritual are actually separate. We just have separated it. We get programmed to believe that's separate.
Yeah, we do, by the way. And we also have a tendency to say, this thing is spiritual or sacred and this thing is not, right? I have a lot of people that come to me and they will be, in my opinion, their well is dry because they're work, right? They're connected to the machine and they're not doing anything that really helps their soul or their heart, or, you know, and I sometimes say to people, but everything that we do can be sacred, right? Yeah.
I woke up one day, Loretta. It's interesting you're saying this, and I haven't thought about this in a while, because we know that Meister Eckhart said many years ago, we're not human beings having, maybe I'm getting the person wrong, but I think so. We're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. And I woke up one day and the thought came to me, what if we're actually spiritual beings having a spiritual experience? And that's this new level of consciousness that many of us have been talking about ushering in, because then I'm not living in duality. This part of me is sacred and therefore good, and this part is human and therefore not good. Even though we're not necessarily saying those words, the energy is there. So I end up compartmentalizing and looking at my quote unquote humanity as something to be changed or shifted. But what if it's to be embraced? What if the true integration is really about understanding that that's all truly one experience?
Well, I actually have goosebumps while you're talking. I think you're onto something there. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're definitely onto something there. I want to have you talk a little bit about, I know that you're a addiction recovery specialist, right? Expert, master, whatever. And I want you to talk a little bit about your own journey of addiction and coming out of that.
Yeah. Well, going back, when I go back to my earliest memories,
Yes.
I remember being happy and filled with joy. And that's become the anchor of my work, conscious recovery, is that we all come into the world as whole and complete beings. My own experience was at age 7, I had a profound experience of closing my heart. There were so many things that led to that I walked, let's just say at that moment, I made some big life decisions. I'm damaged. There's something wrong with me. I'm not good enough. I'm unlovable. I don't know if a 7-year-old has those exact words. I think as a 7-year-old, I just became afraid. I went from being open and curious and loving to closing up and being afraid. I walked around that way for another 7 years. So there's these 7-year cycles: 0 to 7, filled with love and joy; 7 to 14, closed off; 14, discovered drugs and alcohol, roughly, maybe 13, 14. And then that became a 7-year cycle before I got sober, just before I turned 21. My early recovery was so much joy and so much love. And really my spiritual quest started then. But one of the things that's important for me to speak to is when I was around 18 months sober, I was suicidal. And that came from realizing that alcohol and drugs were never the problem. They were just a solution. And at 18 months of thawing out, if you will, those things that hadn't been addressed started coming to the surface. So the foundation of my work now is helping people actually heal these underlying root causes and returning to our original perfection.
I yes, I like what you say, because I do find that, yeah, the things that we do to quote unquote cope or escape or run or whatever it is, the addictions, and drugs and alcohol, as you know, are just one form of addiction, right? But it is to try to keep all of that unprocessed stuff way down deep inside of us. And when that stuff starts to come out, then you really do the deep healing. Do you feel that you have then returned to this state that you had as a child, this natural state?
I'll say it this way, Loretta. I spend more time there than I ever have. And that is such
Okay.
a gift, right? I've had these intense moments. I had an experience in India, for example. I've had a few different experiences where I absolutely have returned to that place and like, oh, this is what it means to be human. This is the way we're quote unquote meant to be. And then, I've come and gone from that. But there's something about having those, for me, what we might call a peak experience or a leaning into reality. Those experiences have allowed me to have a different relationship with what we might call the ego or the personality. I thought the goal was to get rid of that. And we do hear that in some spiritual circles, be rid of the ego, don't be human. I wanted
Yeah.
a finish line, and it would have been a long time ago, by the way, where I would no longer have struggle. I would no longer have feelings. And that's just not been my experience.
Rats. TJ, I was going to have you share that secret, but no, apparently.
Well, I mean, what's interesting about this, and I will say this, because a client asked me years ago, do you really walk around just feeling love and joy and connection and awe and wonder all the time? And my answer was, yes, I do, but I don't always remember that.
Oh, that's a
And
good
that
answer.
answer kind of came from a deep place within me because there's an idea, there was an idea for me, I'll speak for myself. There was an idea for me that somehow I wasn't there. But the truth is, it's always available. But my filters, my programming, Rumi, the great poet Rumi said, our job is not to seek for love, but look at the barriers. I think he said maybe put on top of it or
Yes.
that
Yes.
keep us from experiencing that. So it's not, I need to learn how to be more loving or spiritual. It's that's who I am. What needs to be unlearned so I can experience that more often? And it's a moment to moment choice to return to that.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's absolutely spot on, um, because it takes into account what I call the way that we think. Whatever's going on in the background or the backdrop, or is this a friendly world? Is it an unfriendly world? This sort of thing. You
Yes.
know, and if I say I am love, and all I have to do is figure out how to experience that more, to remember that more. And while I'm saying this, I'm going to say to you in the listening audience, and I know you get this. I work, and I know you do too. I work a lot with trauma, a lot of traumatized people, right? Childhood trauma and things that have gotten in the way of us being able to remember who we really are. And I'm a firm believer that when we remember that we are that, that it is our human and our divine together, but it is also then we can express ourselves, bring our gifts to the world, and that to me is my greatest joy. Yeah,
That's right. Yeah.
yeah,
And thank you for bringing that into the conversation because I want to be very clear that this is a more nuanced conversation, maybe than
yes.
some, because someone, for example, someone shocking, I'm sure you'll be shocked by this, but someone had some comments on social media about one of my talks that were somewhat negative, and I love it because I'm like, oh, let me hear what people think I'm saying, and then we can have a dialogue, which is beautiful. But basically, this person said, "Who are you to say that you can heal trauma?" Science is now showing us that trauma permanently affects the brain and we can no longer, quote unquote, be normal. And that it was heartbreaking. And then I remembered there was a point in my journey that I believed I was my trauma. And that was, it's interesting because it's kind of an important part of the journey. Because at first I was like, oh, I'm fine. I had the perfect childhood. Nothing's wrong here. Like it was so buried deep within me. And then as it started to come up, I started to really identify with that trauma as who I am. And so that I would never want to say to someone, oh, just move on beyond that. We want to move through it. And I know, Loretta, you and I know the only
Yeah,
way out is through, right?
yeah,
But
yeah,
there's a piece that you're speaking to so brilliantly that is the foundation. And that is trauma is something that I have or that has happened, but it's not who I am.
mhm.
And that distinction, if I can have even a moment of realizing that, then I realize that there's a place within me that's unharmed and unharmable. That becomes a different perspective. And therefore, we realize, oh, I can heal this. I can work through this. I do have the inner strength and the ability to do it.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that out. This is lovely because I was having this conversation with someone the other day, and she literally asked me, she goes, Loretta, how do you, like you coming from an abusive background or whatever the deal it is, she says, how do you forgive that? And I said, well, you don't. And she goes, what? And I said, and this is a longer discussion, but I'll just throw it in and before our break, right? But when you take and you look at the words of Jesus from the Aramaic, and I don't mean to get all preachy to people, but the word that Jesus used for forgiveness was drop it, like drop a stone. And in my own reality and in what I do with people, the idea that we are carrying this idea around that I am my trauma, right? Yeah. And when we really realize that that happened, but it is not who I am, and I also don't need to continue to define myself by carrying it like that, then we drop it, and all of a sudden this part, because I can feel it, this part that you're addressing, then we're here, and it changes everything. It literally changes everything.
Yeah. And do we have time to dive in before the break, or do we want to...
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so because this conversation is so important to me, and I love what you're bringing, because a lot of times when we look at the word forgiveness, we think it's one of those words that can be very activating for people. Like, I should forgive, I should be a better person. We tend to sometimes think, I'm going to then pretend like it didn't hurt or it didn't happen. But what we're saying, and I did a workshop once where, very simple, but I had a backpack full of rocks. So it's interesting that you're saying this. And all people had to do, if they were physically capable of putting this backpack of rocks on, and it was heavy, and people stood up in front of the room and they told a story about their life. And I was asking was, how does that weight feel? Would you like to put the backpack down, or do you want to continue to carry that load on your back? It has nothing to do with the other person. That's the key, because I'm sure you have too, but I've worked with people who are having trouble making peace, and the person's not even alive anymore. And the point is, we're giving the power to our past. We're giving our power to the situation. And the question in some ways becomes so simple. Do you want to keep the backpack on? And many people were like, oh, I'm ready. And one person just dropped it and heard the thump on the floor. But I can still remember this person. This person said, I'm not ready to let go of it. I've come to appreciate the weight of this story. I'm not ready to let go yet. And so that's also a valid choice. But then we have to ask, what is it creating for you to carry this heavy, heavy story around? And I know there are a lot of layers we can dive into, but ultimately it does become a choice. Would I like to be free? Would I like to be in love again? Or do I want to continue to identify with this story?
Wow, that is spot on. We're going to take a little station break right there. Please don't go away, TJ Woodward. It is lovely to have you on my show. I can't wait to come back and go even deeper into what we're talking about today. So that's Loretta Brown. We'll be right back.
All right, all clear.
Did you know that 9 out of 10 Americans are sick of the divisions in our country? But there's one small step we can take to remember that we're still connected. All over America, strangers with different political views are coming together to talk about their lives, not politics, and discovering they actually have a lot in common. Because even if we don't see eye to eye, we can still talk heart to heart. So let's talk for a change. Learn more at takeonesmallstep.org.
Energy is powerful. It's all around us, mysterious, full of potential. Directing positive, healing energy to raise your vibrational rate through Reiki can change your life. Reiki Master Loretta Brown has relieved stress, sadness, anger, and even helped clients lose weight, stop smoking, and end sleep disorders. Worldwide, people have sought out Reiki Oasis. If you want help with your dis-ease, visit ReikiOasis.com. Harness life's energy. Visit ReikiOasis.com today.
Do you have something important to say? Want to help improve our world? Need to promote your business uniquely and effectively? KKNW is the answer. Our staff helps broadcasters and podcasters create professional sounding audio. Bring your talent and let our experts help you craft a radio show or podcast that best delivers your message. Learn more at 1150kknw.com. That's 1150kknw.com. KKNW, variety talk radio that's live and local.
Giving local voices a chance to shine. Alternative Talk 1150.
Y'all ready to come back? All right, stand by. Right?
Yeah, I like it. We should set it up.
Right?
Yeah. Anyway, welcome back. My guest today is TJ Woodward. And just a reminder that these shows are archived. You can download them for free at KKNW 1150 AM archives for the original Loretta Brown Show. And of course, we're everywhere. We're on iTunes, X, YouTube, Megaphone, Podcast One, Spotify. I know I've left something out, but you get the idea. There's all kinds of shows. I've been on the air for years. And also, you can find out more about TJ Woodward at tjwoodward.com. Probably. Is that correct, TJ?
That is correct.
Okay. Woo. Ha. Who knew? We use our names. Woohoo. I'm sorry. I was talking to someone the other day and she's trying to start her business and she comes up with a lofty name. I go, people will never find you. You know, you got to figure it out. So before the break, we were talking about dropping it, forgiveness, trauma, how we do that, how we go about that, and also what is the purpose of this trauma, this working through, and just pick that up wherever the thread is for you, TJ.
Yeah, in my book Conscious Recovery, I identify one of the root causes of addictive behavior as unresolved trauma, along with spiritual disconnection and toxic shame. And the trauma is the first experience that creates the disconnection, and then the shame comes from that, right? So that really we come into the world, as we already discussed in the first part of the show, whole and complete, absolutely open, wide open. Some might even say too open, right? So we do need to be taught, quote unquote, the ways of the world, but we also have these traumatic experiences. And those traumatic experiences cause us to create what I call core false beliefs. And the only reason I say I is I add the word false, because we have lies that we're carrying around about ourselves. And those lies become a frequency. It's not just a thought. And the way we heal these traumatic experiences, as we talked about in the beginning of the show, is we anchor first in understanding there's a place within us that hasn't been harmed by that. Now, I know that can be almost a controversial statement, because someone who is beginning to work on their trauma, the last thing we would ever want to say to them is, you're not your trauma, don't worry, right? We don't want to bypass that, because some of us, like in my journey, I was pretending everything was fine. Don't look here, nothing going on under the surface. Why do I keep choosing these relationships? Why do I keep having these frustrating, scenarios at work? Why do I have this relationship with money that keeps getting me into trouble? All of those symptoms are an indicator of something much deeper, right? So as we start to heal that trauma, we then can understand that this is what has happened, but not who I am. And forgiveness becomes making peace. We end up holding on to, and we're using that as the theme, holding on to a story as an identity. I'm a survivor of this, right? And that's an important part of the evolution. But at some point, it's time for us to take our power back. And that's ultimately what it's about.
Yeah, this idea that this is my story. It's my story. Yeah. And if I don't have my story, then who am I?
Yes.
Right. And how do I present myself? If I have to take off that face, which I've so carefully constructed right? In order to be able to fit in, navigate, or function, right? Now what?
Yeah,
So,
and
yeah.
we have these what I call brilliant strategies, formerly known
Mhm.
as coping mechanisms, right? And once again on social, someone didn't like that recently. Like, how dare you call addiction a brilliant strategy? Well, the reason I call it a brilliant strategy is it saved my life. It literally was brilliant at the time.
Yeah.
What I'm not saying is like continuing to drink and use and, do all the things that come with that continue to be brilliant. But if we start with realizing that the trauma, the disconnection, and the shame created this core false belief, that becomes a frequency for my life, and it's too painful to live there. So I do develop brilliant strategies to manage or to cope, and usually they at one point helped me have relief or to feel safe, because
Yeah.
all of us want to experience love and safety. And so outside of ourselves, there are behaviors that help initially, but then they're unfortunately no longer serving us. So we need to start developing some different ways of being.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I realize also with people that sometimes we brilliantly, as you so say, have somehow kept our essence alive through
Mm.
the choices we've made. And those choices might not be the best, right? But we're here. And there's always a point of being able to begin from somewhere, wherever it is that you are, right?
Yeah, and I love that
Yeah.
you're bringing that into the conversation, because a lot of times when we talk about healing trauma, we tend to think about the things that quote unquote happen to us, especially as young children, and that's very valid. And of course, we are not to blame for our own trauma as children, but there's something deeper too. And I think a lot of times when we talk about dropping the story or moving beyond the story or living beyond the story, that's the way I like to frame it. A lot of it is the things that we have done is what we're carrying even more shame about. Like the strategies I developed, like I remember I just was a thief when I was a teenager because I felt so inadequate and so not good enough and so not lovable. That was a journey that I had to heal because I had so much shame. Like I didn't even want to ever, I would have never said that, right? Because there's so much shame there. But that was the truth of my experience. And if I don't bring that to the surface, it can't possibly be healed. It doesn't mean I have to run around telling everyone every part of my story like I am now, but
Yeah.
it has to come out of the unconscious so we can heal it.
You're really saying something though here about shame, because a lot of people, like you say, they jump over that part or they run from that part. That feeling of shame uh, can be because you've done something shameful or because you've been victimized, or even your behavior. When you look at it and you go, my goodness, I've been doing this and this, and I feel so ashamed, and we don't want to look at it, right? And it's a
And
big deal. Yeah.
yeah, and the key here, and this was life-changing for me, I thought I felt shame because of my behavior.
Mm.
And I realized that the behavior actually came from the shame.
Ah,
And that was life-changing for me because the shame came before the behavior. So that's why we call it a shame spiral. I feel broken, so I act broken. I feel more shame because of what I just did, and then it's a downward spiral, right? And that becomes this way of being where I start to believe that I'm damaged or broken at a very deep level, which is not the ultimate truth.
wow. That is absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna ponder that one. Thank you. I wanna ask you, you have this concept called living in the question.
Yeah.
Please tell us what that means.
Well,
God, I feel like I'm in a question right now.
yes, you know what, that I think that's what you've done for the last 15 years in your show. You've lived in the question with guests and like,
Yeah.
let's be in the question. Simply said, judgment restricts, curiosity expands. So once, and quantum mechanics is now measuring this, right? And it's basically what spiritual teachers have been saying for centuries and mystics, that the observer has a profound effect, right? So if I've decided that this is the one answer, then that's what I experience. Curiosity expands. Another way to say it, Course in Miracles says, all I know is not all there is to know. So when I think I have an answer, and the world teaches us to find answers, Many people think that's what science is, which is very interesting because science is not really finding answers. It's really being in the question and looking at the different possibilities. And then in that way, we're always open to a new way of seeing or being. So when I decide I know something, that concretizes it into being. When I'm in the question, I'm expanding my awareness or my consciousness. Simply said. I hope that was simply said.
No, I think that's simply said. Living in the question to me leaves a bit of, shall I say, flexibility, openness, or curiosity to discover, or, you know, because we get caught up in this thing like, well, this is the truth and I'm right and that's wrong. And it's this very definitive thing. And once that gets in there, sometimes people get really rigid, they get really positional with that, and it's really hard to move or grow with it. So that to me is what you were saying. Living in the question allows me to be in a space where I'm like, well, I don't know. So
Yeah. It's like you're telling my story. That was me my entire 20s. I had the right answer. The world was damaged and broken, and I came to understand I saw the world as broken because I felt broken. Again, it doesn't mean there's not things happening in the world that we want to be part of helping to heal, but it comes down to something really simple. When I think the world needs to change in order for me to be happy, I'm going to suffer. When I flip that and say, let me expand upon my own awareness by living in the question, then I can actually contribute something that's useful to the world instead of demanding from the world. In other words, we're shifting from the law of attraction to the law of radiance, right? The law of attraction is on some level, and it might not be conscious, I need to attract something so that I can be complete. I need to attract the partner or the job, and that's why we do the vision boards. All of that is wonderful and quite frankly fun. And there's this place where I realize, oh, this is about what I'm what I'm bringing to the world, not what I'm getting from the world.
You, I wrote that down. I'm broken, so the world is broken. Okay, so, and I know you said things after that, but you know, my brain stopped. I'm thinking about this idea that when we look out into the world, it is broken. What? And so if I am not broken, the world is not broken.
Yeah, you said it earlier, and I think at some point, you know, and Wayne Dyer had some quote very similar to this. Some people say Einstein said this. There's a lot of people attributed to this idea. At some point, we get to make the fundamental decision: is the world kind and loving, or is the world brutal and hostile? There is evidence to support both of those. So the reality is, the truth is, it's both and, right? Things are happening in the world. We're not pretending, and I'm going to keep saying that, we're not pretending like things aren't happening in the world. And at some point in my evolution, I would have said, how dare you? There are things in the world that are horrific, and we need to make a difference. But my answer was, we need to fight for that. Anytime I hear the word fight, I mean, to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole, and this, I just would love to see this change. We literally send people to the next dimension of life, known as their death, by saying she lost her battle with cancer.
Oh,
He lost his fight. It's like, no, we did not lose a battle with cancer. That's a framework that we've created. It was an experience in my body. And yes, no one wants to have that experience, I'm guessing, but the fight creates more of the fight. And so when we look at the politics, for example, I'm right and you are wrong is the fundamental disease in the world. And that's the fundamental disease in the mind. It's always an outer reflection of an inner reality. Always. There's no other possibility. If I feel divided within, I will experience division outside of me. Here's a practical example, and it's kind of a funny story, but I think it speaks to this. My dad and his wife they say they live in LA, Lower Alabama. I love that. On the Gulf of Mexico or the Gulf of America now, depending on where, right? But they live there. And she was in Los Angeles, LA, where I live, for the first time, and she said, people are so nice here. I'm so surprised. And I said, tell me more. There's living in the question. Tell me more. Well, people in Alabama were saying people in LA are not going to be nice. They're arrogant. They're conceited. They're this, they're that. She's like, everyone's so kind and loving. I said, Nancy, don't worry. If we walk around here in Los Angeles and ask people, tell me what you think about people in lower Alabama, they'll probably have some judgment too. We've got, this is a very practical thing of these two different geographic areas that hold a particular consciousness, but they both believe you will not find kind and loving people. But the truth is, there will be all types of people everywhere. And a deeper reality is, I'm all types of people.
Yeah.
I have the ability to be kind and loving and open, or I have the ability to be all these other things that I would judge. When I come to that, there's a deeper level of freedom, and that's how we can stay in the question.
Yeah. Staying in the question. You also say not to start questions with why, and how can we reframe that?
Well, I'm going to do a little gesture because this is why.
Okay.
Why does this keep happening to me?
Tomorrow is another day.
Oh, why? You know, the question, why do I keep attracting unavailable people? I remember I was on the treadmill. This is a long time ago because I had a big yellow Walkman with these little fuzzy, right? And I was on the treadmill and I was listening to Marianne Williamson, and she said, people keep saying, why do I keep attracting unavailable people? The more valuable question is, why am I attracted to them? I literally fell off the treadmill. Like I had to catch, I mean, I almost fell all the way to the floor because, wow. But the reason that I invite people to use questions like who, what, where, when, or how, who, what, where, when, how, that's more expansive. And it doesn't keep us in the world is happening to me mode. It's more empowering. Rather than saying, why do I keep attracting unavailable people? Why does this keep happening to me? I would say, what else is possible here?
Mm-hmm.
What is here for me to learn and discover? What are the infinite possibilities of this? Let's say, you know, there are major layoffs at your company and you quote unquote lose your job. And you might say, why? Once again, instead, I wonder what wants to emerge here. What do I truly want to do? It's not negating the emotional experience. We can feel whatever's there, but when we attach a story to the feeling, we can get stuck. If I feel it, allow myself to feel it, whatever the emotion is, then we can move into these empowering questions and create a different possibility for ourselves.
You know, that is so to the point, because you're exactly right. When we say, well, why did this happen to me? That has that tonality of victim or powerlessness, or it was done to you. And whereas if I say, what else is possible here? That's a great question. What else?
Yeah.
What else is possible here?
If
Wow.
there's no other question
Right.
that we ask, that's the one to me. What
Mhm.
else is possible here? A spiritual teacher of mine or a mentor at one point said, I would come to her and I would say, I don't know if I should do this or this. And she would always say, is there a third option? I mean, of course, there's 10,000 options, but in my mind, it's either this or this. I either quit my job or I confront my boss, whatever it is, right?
Yeah, right.
And she would always say, is there a third option? Well, I mean, yeah, I guess I could sit with the feelings for 24 hours. And, you know, it's like it would then sort of spawn some different ideas.
You know what? I actually am thinking that is very helpful, because we do have a tendency to be extreme. Like,
Yeah.
you got to get this thing done, or I'm going to lay on the couch and eat
Right.
Cheetos, right? You know, something, right? There's no
Oh
in
my gosh,
between.
yes. And that's
Yeah.
that polarized thinking.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
and to drill in a little, is at some level of consciousness, there's always good, bad, right, wrong. And at another level of consciousness, those actually don't exist. We understand those are frameworks. Now, I know people are being like, well, what about this? That there's no way you can say that's not wrong. It's not that I'm saying it's right. That's the polarized in the mind. It's like, I'm looking at this through the lens of curiosity. And again, then I can ask myself, because another question I might ask is, how can I be useful here? How
Yeah.
can I contribute? How can I bring more love to this situation? How can I support my friend who's going through, a diagnosis or a breakup? How can I be more present for her rather than, I think I know what you need to do. Or like, yeah, he's horrible. Isn't it great you're not in that relationship anymore?
Yeah. Yeah. I would like to pull this into something you mentioned during the break, the collective trauma. We're all
Yeah.
going through so much right now, and it's wild and crazy out there. Pull that thread into the conversation.
Well, I mean, I think there's a couple things I'm going to say about that, and I don't know the source, but my friend Gregory is reading a book, and I don't know what it is, but he's basically, this book is saying we actually live on the best time on planet Earth. There's actually less poverty, less hunger, less war, less division, but we've decided we live in these horrible times, right? Like things that are happening, like with the presidential election. Members, I know I'll speak to like members of the LGBTQ community, my own, I would say my community, even though I don't really identify as that as my community. It's like, it's part of who I am. There is a collective trauma response. There's fear. And then from fear, there's this outpicturing of like, this is horrible. And we know spiritually, once we say it's horrible, then that's the experience we have.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean we're going to pretend like it's not happening, but we start asking questions like, how can I be part of healing this? How can I stand for something rather than against something? What do I want to stand for now? I want to stand for equality. I want to stand for love. I want to stand for connection. But here's the thing, and it's inconvenient. If I'm going to stand for connection and love and equality, that means I get to do that with family members who have a different opinion than I do. Or I don't. That's a choice I get to make.
Yes, and talk for a little bit about, I'm going to put it this way. I feel like that healing trauma, or going through everything that we're talking about today, living in the question, is almost an initiatory path. And we do this personally, but we're doing this collectively. We're doing this globally.
That's right. So in my own journey, the addiction was a solution to a deeper wound. When that addiction kind of quote unquote quit working, I got sober, but I hadn't yet addressed the wound. If we look at, because they're going to look back in 100 years or 200 years and they're going to say, these people were starting to understand. They were starting to get it. We're actually all one. We're not really separate. We're like, cancer is literally, and I'm not a doctor to be clear, but it's literally, parts of our bodies at war with each other, right? That's what creates disease. Same thing globally as a species, if you will. We realize now on some level, we're starting to understand we're actually one. So I'm not separate. So when we're at war with one another, that's literal disease. The way we heal that is through curiosity and through openness. And the way we heal that is by not othering people. There was a time in human evolution when we needed to have a tribe of like-minded people to literally stay alive. We walked out of the cave, we might get eaten. So we needed a tribe to protect from that.
Yeah.
We could still say that that's somewhere in our DNA, but we know there's something greater that's possible. We know that at our core, we're spiritual beings, and moving beyond that is to that curiosity will allow us to understand that I'm actually not separate from. And I'll say this, there are certain public figures who know how to push the button. And people actually say this person's not smart. We all know who I'm talking about. This person knows how to activate people, and then people are at odds and at war, and then that person keeps rising to power. If we drop the rope, and that's not pretending like things aren't happening, but if we're at war with, there's that power. So I'm inviting us to look at some deeper possibilities for humanity, honestly.
Well, I so agree with you. I always have this analogy of, if someone comes in the room and throws plates around, everybody's spinning plates, then they're busy doing that rather than attending to what's really happening in that room.
Mhm.
And I think that the parts of us also can do that. Like this to me is such a multi-layered conversation, right? So if inside myself, I also have, spinning plates, or there's these activated parts. Yeah. Wow. Then to bring myself into a place of wholeness, or to bring all of that in, is really living in the question. And also you said bringing in curiosity and
Yeah.
creativity, honestly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my greatest passion is working with clinicians now, healers of all types, helping healers heal. That's my
Yeah.
mission for this year in particular. And I say something that is provocative, but the only thing I really need to do for my client is my own healing. And when I remember that, I'm available for them in a very different way.
Yeah. Where can people find you? And yeah, and what message do you want to leave people with?
Thank you. TJWoodward.com. You can find me out socials, books, and all of that. The message I want to leave everyone with is the message I always want to leave everyone with. And that is, if no one's told you yet today, you are a whole and complete spiritual being. You came into the world as a spark of divinity. And that is the greatest reality. That is the truth of who and what you are. So no matter what you've done or what's happened, remember that great remembering that there's a place within you that's unharmed and unharmable.
I love that so much. TJ Woodward, thank you for being on my show. And let's take a moment. Let's send some love to everybody. Wah! Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Wah!
Yes,
And
be that love.
yeah, be that love. Thank you so much. Have a great week. And
Thank you.
yeah, you're so welcome. Thank you, Mr. Benny Mathers. You are the best.